Hey 302, I'm Jackie Ferris, and it's my job to bring you some of the most interesting things in your favorite area code. Today on the menu, we're at Winterthur Museum checking out a new exhibition called Costuming the Crown. It's a behind-the-scenes look at the Emmy Award-winning Netflix series The Crown. So grab some popcorn and get ready to 302 and chill. Whether you're a Netflix subscriber or just a history buff, chances are pretty good you've seen the Emmy Award-winning series, The Crown. Today we're going to take a behind-the-scenes look at the early life of Queen Elizabeth II at a new exhibition called Costuming the Crown at Winterthur Museum. I'm joined now by one of three of the curators, Kim Collison. Kim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This is an amazing exhibit. First of all, how did you guys get the idea for this?
Well, Winterthur has done a couple of costume exhibitions in the past. Years ago, we did an exhibition called Fashion and Film, and more recently in 2014, we did the costumes from Downton Abbey. Both of those exhibitions taught us that our visitors like costumes very much. And so we wanted to do another one. Costumes are a great object to teach people how to relate to objects and how to learn history from them. And so it's a sort of a unique opportunity. This particular exhibition is really exciting because we were able to work with the costume designers. So it's really sort of a behind the scenes at making the costumes themselves and how they use those costumes to interpret history. So
this is the first thing you see whenever you walk into the exhibition. Talk to me about what we're seeing.
So we opened the exhibition talking about the coronation. Obviously it's an important moment in history. It's when she becomes queen. And so we wanted to look at how those particular costumes transform her life in a way. And in the same way, they transform the actors and take them into their roles. So in this section, we have not only the dress and the coronation robes that Queen Elizabeth II wore in 1953 during the coronation, obviously replicas that Netflix used to recreate that moment, but we also have an example of Philip's peer robe. So other people would have worn peer robes, the dukes and duchesses, people of that nature.
Now, I know that you said that you worked very closely with the costume designers, one of which worked on Game of Thrones. Talk to me a little bit about the experience of working with them and knowing about the research that they've done and the research that you guys have done as well.
Right. So the exhibition was a collaboration. My co-curators, Jeff Croft and Linda Eaton, and I were able to work with both people from the production company, from a number of different costume houses that supplied costumes to the exhibition, as well as with the designers, Michelle Clapton and Jane Petrie. So Michelle Clapton designed for season 1 of the series and Jane Petrie for season 2. And we had the opportunity to talk with them, interview them, and find out sort of what was on their minds and kind of behind creating certain costumes, which is really just fabulous because even certain things we had read or that we thought we understood in terms of color or why they may have chosen something, we didn't always, guess correctly, but hearing it right from them was great. And they put a lot of thought into color and details. And the thing about The Crown on Netflix is that it is historical fiction, right? So you're seeing a side of the royal family that can only be imagined. And so they use these costumes not only to establish it as a historical drama and to get certain things really right in terms of replicating historical moments, but they also are creating characters for us to enjoy. They're building these people and establishing them in the story. And so there are a lot of costumes that are created to sort of show us, what they may have been like, even though we don't really know.
So basically we have some costumes that we will see in photos and others that were imagined that maybe we didn't see, but that's the kind of thing they would have worn.
Correct.
So talk to me a little bit about that. I know this is what we're seeing. We're seeing the coronation first up, but as we go through, what are we going to be seeing?
So we started with the coronation, which obviously is one of those instances where things had to be carefully recreated. The next section continues that. We see some things like weddings and other moments that are historically documented. Things like one of the tours and when she's in Kenya, a dress from that. The following section takes us into moments that we don't know what they look like. So it may be moments when they're at home, or it could have been a private celebration. Clothes that Margaret would have worn in her everyday. We know she was a trendsetter and sort of in the forefront of fashion in the 60s, so starting to see some of that. Looking at the Duke and Duchess of Windsor and their more trendy styles. And then we end the exhibition kind of taking it back to that historical moment and looking at costumes that were specifically worn for a television or photo appearance, not just a historical event, but were chosen with the idea in mind that they would be portraying themselves in some sort of lasting moment in those costumes that they wore and then were replicated by the costume designers.
Well, I can't wait to show the folks at home the rest of the exhibition. Kim, thank you very much. We'll be right back.
I'm Kelly from Stitch House Brewery on Market Street, and we love the 302.
Welcome back. We are in part 2, also known as Dressing the Part, and I'm joined by another curator, Jeff Croft. Jeff, thank you very much for joining us. Talk to me a little bit about what dressing the part means.
Well, what we wanted to do is look at the costumes that they had to replicate very carefully. The costume designers said if they got it right with the wedding dresses, the military uniforms, they'd create enough trust that viewers, when they looked at creating character in the private moments, would find that all very believable too.
Now, when we're looking at some of the military uniforms, they're not necessarily, they're costumes, but they're not. They're actual replicas of actual uniforms. Talk to me about the detail and the research that goes into this.
They had an advisor, they called their sort of secret weapon, who had been part of the royal household, who knew every detail of the orders, the insignia, what the military uniforms should look like. Because they knew if they got that wrong, there was likely to be many people in the audience who would go, they have the ribbons in the wrong order. They were also fortunate, there's a company that we got these uniforms from called Angels, which dates to the 1840s, which did costumes for theater and movies later and TV, and they have over 1 million costumes. So they're the real source for the military uniforms, but just drawers and drawers of insignias of the Order of the Garter, Order of the Thistle, all the things that you need to put together an exacting uniform.
Now, whenever we're talking about the Royal Navy, that's one thing, but there are also costumes of other people in high places. For instance, whenever the Queen goes to Kenya, she greets a chief, and he has a crown on it, and Philip says, "Oh, that's a great hat," and she says, "Oh, that's not a hat, that's a crown." Talk to me about getting something like that accurate.
Yeah, and that's so important because they were trying to be very aware of all the nuances of status. If you think about in Britain, they're so careful in terms of every detail because people recognize it. They understand the code almost. It's the same thing in Kenya, and there were 6 or 7 chiefs of the different tribes that made up Kenya who are part of that scene. One of them, the Maasai chief, and he's the one who wears this elaborate feathered crown, and that is carrying the story along wonderfully. Philip says, "Nice hat," essentially, and the queen corrects him, saying it's a crown, so Philip will understand the status of the man he's just met.
Now, I know that one of the big draws is going to be the wedding dresses.
Oh, yes.
Queen Elizabeth's wedding dress and Margaret's. Can you talk to me a little bit first about Elizabeth's wedding dress and the significance?
Yeah. So Elizabeth's wedding dress for her wedding in 1947 was a very elaborate one created by the designer Norman Hartnell, who did so many of the dresses for the royal family. And it has very elaborate embroidery and beadwork on it. And so this was another one where Michelle Clapton, who did that dress in season, wanted all the details right. So there were 6 embroiderers who spent 7 weeks doing the embroidery on it, particularly paying attention to the bodice, because that would be most seen in terms of being on camera. So doing that all right. What we also heard was that it was very heavy and it was very warm when they were filming. So Claire Foy really was a trooper, is how they explained it, to do so many takes for that.
And Margaret's wedding dress?
Margaret's wedding dress, it's interesting. Same designer, over a dozen years later, and so different in style, much more simple. And the interesting thing is, in some ways, Meghan Markle's dress reminds us more of Princess Margaret's, very sort of clean in lines. But Meghan Markle wanted to sort of pay homage to Queen Elizabeth, so on her veil, it's kind of copying the flowers of the Commonwealth, just like Queen Elizabeth's coronation gown had all the different symbols of the Commonwealth. So this really nice connection.
Sure, all 3 gowns were just stunning, and everyone was just fascinated by what the royal women wear for their weddings and everything. And whenever you come in, I noticed that you have pictures of the actual event and then of the recreation from the series. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we really wanted people to have this point of reference because, as we've been saying, this is a window into history, drawing in and looking at how the costume designers and the set designers so carefully recreated things. So we wanted people to be able to look at the real Elizabeth, the real Margaret, and then look right over next to it to see how it was portrayed in the film. And it's very clear how successful they were that way. We also have a video in a little theater here of the coronation, the Crown's version of the coronation, mixed in with film clips from the actual coronation to show how that was all woven together.
So there's just so much to see here as far as the exhibit, but we haven't shown everyone everything. Thank you, Jeff, very much for joining us, and we'll be right back.
You're welcome.
You're watching the 302.
Welcome back. We are in the section of the exhibition called Creating Character. Now, Kim, what exactly are we going to see whenever we come into this room?
So the Creating Character section is about the moments that are not historically documented. So this is where Peter Morgan, the writer of The Crown, imagines what the family may be like at home, or what their relationships may be, the things that we don't know for fact. This is where the dramatization really comes in. So the costume designers had a little bit of license here to imagine what our characters and the historical figures would have worn in those moments. So there are things like what the Queen wore to the stables, for instance. We know she loves horses. But there are also costumes that sort of reflect personality. One of the things the costume designers do, for instance, is they make deliberate choices to make Margaret and Elizabeth different from one another. Margaret is a little bit freer in the costumes that she wears. One of the dresses that she wears has pockets, and designer Michelle Clapton describes that as, you know, sort of fun-loving and free, and obviously something the Queen would not have had the luxury of wearing. We also see the Duke and Duchess of Windsor in this room, and some of the costumes that they're seen wearing at home. They are very much in the spirit of what the Duke and Duchess of Windsor were known to have worn, but the costume designers had a little bit of fun with interpreting those looks. We also see some of Margaret's sort of early 1960s looks. You know, she's very fashion forward, and some of my favorite costumes are those actually. They're fun and playful. Designer Jane Petrie actually talks about working with Vanessa Kirby, the actress that plays Princess Margaret, and choosing colors and some of those styles. One of the costumes is one that she wears at home when the decorators come to do their apartment, and she has her in a shirt with a matching scarf, and she describes how she was sort of playing as if she had a role in this decoration, where really she's not doing anything with her hands. She's just present. So there are a lot of fun things here. We also see how the designers establish the Queen in her role with the prime ministers in this room. Sort of those moments at home where the prime minister comes for an audience with her. Early on in season 1, Michelle Clapton sets that up by creating what she calls a uniform for the Queen. So she has very similar suits that she wears, or dresses that she wears throughout that season. And it's sort of a way of kind of establishing this very young Queen in this important role that she has. In the season 2 of the show, we see that relaxed a bit. She still wears those suits. Jane Petrie creates some of those as well. But there are moments when she's with the Prime Minister that are a little bit more relaxed, and we see her sometimes in a skirt and a sweater and a blouse, which she often wears at home, always with her pearls. But
her signature pearls,
yes.
Of course. Now, I know that there are a couple of gowns. The teal gown in the back was used twice. Usually, that's not usually done.
That isn't usually done. There, actually, interestingly, there are 2 costumes in this room that were used twice. The teal dress is one of them. So Jane Petrie created that costume, and it was made for a scene where the Queen and Philip go to the ballet. But she is seen mostly in a wrap. You only see the strap of the dress, and it's this beautifully embroidered dress that Jane and her team made. So she was disappointed that that's all that you got to see. So when the opportunity presented itself to have a dress of that nature for the anniversary, it was Philip and Elizabeth's 10th anniversary, she had her wear that dress again, in which you get to see it in its full glory.
It's really beautiful, and it's also on the poster.
Yes, and then the other dress that was worn twice is actually a dress that is Margaret wears, and it is one that, you know, it's obvious, it's actually hard to tell that she wears it in 2 occasions, but she wears it once when she's singing with her father, and she wears it a second time when she goes and meets with Peter Townsend.
That's a very touching scene. I remember that very clearly.
Yes, and so, you know, she wears this dress in 2 instances with the men that she really loved, and I think that Michelle Clapton really liked the dress for that reason.
So they were really able, the designers, to make the costumes almost like a character in and of themselves.
Yeah, and they certainly help to build character, and that's one of the things that I really enjoyed learning about when we were preparing this exhibition, is the ways in which they really thought about how these costumes help to tell the story. Mm-hmm. And I just found that fascinating. You know, the details and the things that they considered in creating the costumes, so that they knew they were evoking the personalities that they thought Peter Morgan had created in the story.
That certainly comes out. It's a very, very beautifully designed exhibition. Kim, thank you very much for joining us. We'll be right back. Season 3 of The Crown comes out later this year, but you can catch Costuming the Crown until January 5th of 2020. For more information, you can go to winterthur.org. That'll do it for this edition of the 302. We're going to leave you with some of the goodies in the gift shop. See you later.